Hi guys, so this video here is taken from a full course on building a track from scratch in Logic. You'll be able to watch all of the Logic related videos for the course on YouTube. There will be a link to the playlist below for you. But in this course, we're basically building this whole track from scratch. If you want to follow along with that, you can. And if you want to download the project file and all the samples that go with the course, there's a link to that in the description as well. I hope this video is useful to you and that you're able to follow along with the course. Let's jump into it.
Feeling heavy, but now I'm steady, going up from hitting the ground.
All right, so in this phase, we're going to be kind of mastering the track. Really, what I want you to be able to do is get tracks that sound really great for you to pop up in places like SoundCloud and Audiomack and things like that. You can get really great sounds out of stock Logic, but there are other options out there, like iZotope's Ozone 9, something that I use massively. And if I'm ever doing my own like digital releases, I do use that pretty heavily. But to get something that's like SoundCloud ready and like top quality demo level, we can do that in Logic with a few tools. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to aim this at getting something ready to go out on a digital streaming platform. So it's going to be aimed at like Spotify's guidelines, which is a good bet for things like SoundCloud and other services, YouTube, things like that. They all sit in a very similar scope, with Spotify being the most clear that you can really follow as a guideline. However, if you're looking to get your track released commercially, if you're working with a label, they'll probably handle mastering. If you're looking to do it yourself, I really do advise sending it off to a mastering engineer, just somebody else to listen through your music and listen objectively. You've spent loads of time working on it. All those little changes and things you've made, they build up over time. You don't hear them anymore. Someone else having a fresh listen, they've got a good perspective on it, and hopefully it's what they do a lot of their time. So in our case, the project itself, we're just going to work on the stereo out bus. Now, what we need to check is to make sure we've got plenty of headroom. Now, I've guided this so that we've been using our gain staging, and we've always worked by reducing things away rather than adding all the time. So we should have plenty of headroom to work with. Let's just check that out. So we've taken everything off of the stereo bus and just got a gain left on there for the time being, and that's muted. We just want to see in our busiest section what we're peaking at.
Oh, you left me were scars. Can you tell me what we are?
Cool, so playing through there, loudest point, we've got peaks minus 3.1 dB of headroom, with our average being somewhere between like 6 and 9. But our absolute loudest peak, well away from clipping, so we've got plenty of room to work with even at the loudest point there, which is great. There's a couple of plugins we are going to want to have on our chain, and gain's going to be one of them. And it's not for me to adjust the gain or the balance. It's purely there as that mono check as we go and do the rest of our mixing. Now in Logic, we also want to go into metering, and we are going to grab the loudness meter. We're going to want a limiter. Now, the limiter is going to be the last effect in our chain before we go to the gain and the loudness, because the gain and the loudness are there as measurements and checks at the end of our effects. On the adaptive limiter, we shouldn't need the DC offset, but we will want to have true peak detection switched on. We're going to add right at the top of the chain, Q, below it, compressor. Then just in between that compressor and the limiter, we're also going to make use of the match EQ. All right, so the EQ, first off, going to do something that might be unexpected. Remember right at the start, I did a top and tail where I just cut everything off. So while I was working, I wasn't worrying about rogue low end and high end. Well, we're actually going to do a similar thing here as well. We're going to top this off straight away. We're going to leave it at 20K, and it's going to be a nice harsh slope. That's going to be one of the first things that we apply. And we're doing the same thing here on the low end. We're going to go to a 24 dB slope there as well and leave it down at 20 Hertz. Now, the reason we're doing this, we're going to go to a low quality format and we're going to go to WAV. But when we go to a website, it's going to become a lower quality format. Things like noise get added right up in the high end. There's lots of distortion that's added. Now that's all going to add up into effectively your headroom and effectively the overall loudness measurement. So we actually want to make sure there's nothing above or below our 20 hertz and our 20 kilohertz range. We just want to cut those off nice and quickly at that point. And my reference track that I use actually has a slope more something like this, where it's actually rolling off a lot of the high end. I find it's okay to leave it all there, and I like to have that extra bit of shine, but it's interesting to know that that is the case in some cases. We can do any kind of broad stroke EQ here we think we might need as well. And that's where we're just going to play the whole track just on a loop like this and have a listen through and make any subtle EQ adjustments. I give myself a limit when doing mastering EQ of 1.5 dB in any kind of gain and any kind of subtraction around 3 dB because we want to be really subtle. I also keep the Q high so we've got nice broad curves if we do anything at all.
All you left me were scars. Can you tell me what we are? Oh
So we've just made a really subtle lift here. I just found this nice space about 1430 hertz that just need a nice lift. And something here is a little bit boxy, just very gentle curve out. And that is all I feel we need to touch right there. Now, compression wise, we are going to probably compress ever so slightly. What's important now, we're going to get the loudness meter up. It's our LUFS meter just here. And we've got a target of minus 14 LUFS. That's going to be a target aim for Spotify on our integrated LUFS counter. So we can just bring this slider up here to minus 14. We're going to hit start. And now when we play, it's going to work out our integrated LUFS. And our integrated LUFS show up here over on the right-hand side under the I. And I've just dialed that in by ear there by having a really fast attack and release and then just effectively moving the attack so I can hear the drum start getting through. Like the kick was getting completely suppressed and then it started to get through nicely. And done a similar thing with the release so you can hear the compression hold on the drum. So that's the main thing I wanted to glue together just there. And the makeup gain, I've actually dialed it back just the tiniest amount and left the release on auto as well. So it will fluctuate around this 48 milliseconds. That's not going to be hard and fast. And I've used the Studio FET purely because I like using the Studio FET a lot. If you get a result you're after with one of the other compressors by doing the same dialing it in, completely fine. Just have the gain plugin up now. Just going to quickly sum to mono. And everything's still there. Cool. Okay, so now for the match EQ, what I'm going to do, instead of bringing the track back in, I'm going to use the plugin I used before, but you know the process now to bring in the track, or you can have saved your match EQ profile. In fact, what I will do in this project for you is I will save you a match EQ profile, so you've then got it usable for other projects based off of the pendulum track here. So let's learn our reference. What we'll do, this reference for the EQ will be saved here within this project. And we'll just get rid of Magic AB. Let's get our reference. And like before, go to the EQ curve, hit match, and we've got our nice matching curve there. Looks like I was right about taking out some of those areas, but that's done it much more. So do our fade extremes. We definitely don't need those big low end adjustments, that's for sure. Probably right the way up to sort of 200 hertz ranges are actually okay. We can fade it off quite gently. And similarly at the high end, be quite subtle with that. And I'll dial this back. Remember, so this is 5 dB of change across here. I want to be at least half that, somewhere around there. Really subtle. So I'm pretty damn close with this mix, which is nice to see. And we're going to smooth off. So the smoothing slider at the bottom here is going to stop that being such like a bumpy looking EQ. And it's going to smooth it out a bit more like so. There it is without. That's nice with it in. And that's almost the last thing. So on the limiter, we're going to a streaming platform. What's recommended by Spotify is to have at least 1 dB of headroom. Seems crazy. If we were going to CD, we'd do something like 0.1 to 0.3. For a streaming platform where it's going to be converted, they like minus 0.1 on the out ceiling. It's going to take that gain away, leave true peak detection on. Look ahead of 50 milliseconds should be okay. Or we can apply the optimal 20 millisecond. We're going to bring up our loudness meter. You can see that we're integrated at the minute of minus 17.5. We want to try and get that so that our busiest point is maybe a little bit above minus 14 and we're sort of averaging minus 14. So let's reset. Now we're going to push the gain back. So adding 9.5 in gain overall. That's very similar to some limiters you'll see, like you pull the threshold down. Basically, we gain it up into there and push it into the ceiling. That is how this particular limiter works. So we're going to reset our integrated again and test it over that section. So we're a little bit hot now, so we're probably going to take it down to 8.5. That's going to be our happy medium there. We'll reset our integrated again. So we can see it's pushed beyond 14, but during this breakdown section, we might find we get that full decibel back. So our average is still going to be where we want it to be, even though we pushed that section to be a little bit louder. There we go. So we're back in that ballpark as an average. It's going to actually dip below. So this is the average that we're after. This lets us push it a little bit more on those louder sections because we've got a section that's turned down quite a bit. we've gained back half a dB over time here.
All my thoughts in my mind. Oh no, I love you, but I can't see your view.
And we'd go through and we'd monitor the whole song through that process, aiming to get our average integrated at that -14 kind of area. Now, you can see over a quieter period, we'll start to get it back a little bit. So if it does at some point ever so slightly push beyond 14, that's not a huge issue if you've got a quiet section coming up, because it's an average over the length of the song. And that's how Spotify is going to look at it as well. So if you've got like a full-on aggressive track right the way through, and then you try and really limit that, you're going to be pushing all the time. But if you've got nice ebbs and flows in your tracks, you can get some really loud moments out of it. So once we've got all of that set up and ready to go, we're obviously looking at bouncing out our tracks. You might have gone through the process and you've got multiple versions like me. Well, simply, we're just going to use the markers at the top to measure out where we want the track to go and how we're going to bounce it out. We're going to switch off gain, switch off loudness. Definitely don't need to be there. Command and B. And we're going to bounce out two versions. We're going to do a PCM and MP3. PCM, we're going to keep it in WAV or AIF, depends how you decide to work. I've always worked in WAV, so I stick with that. 24 bits, you've got your full dynamic range, even though you're limiting the track. Give the best quality file you possibly can. In my case, I worked in 44.1, so 44100 for your sample rate. If you worked in 96K or something like that for some reason, then you need to put it in that. File type interleaved. This means it's going to embed the left and right channel into a single WAV file rather than independent left and right. At this stage, we would potentially apply dithering as well. The dithering algorithms can sound slightly different depending on your track. I personally like the noise shaping options. Choose it, play it, maybe do all three and listen back to decide which one's your favorite. Just have a quick look at your start and end points, make sure they're correct. As you can see, the end point is where I did the loop to, which is why we just set that loop right off the bat. You've got two bounce down options, real time and offline. If you've got lots of sample libraries with round robin, real time might be better for you. Offline is generally going to be quicker. Include the audio tail, which means if you've got a delay or a reverb or something at the last note, it's going to just keep processing until it's got that complete thing done, and we don't need it to normalize. On MP3, we want it to be 320 kbps in both instances. You can use a variable bitrate if you would like, but if you go into sampling services and things like that, we're just using this to test out what an MP3 is going to perform like for us. So we're going to use the best encoding option. We are going to filter frequencies below 10 Hertz. So we talked about those extra frequencies beyond the spectrum. We have an option to do that here, but we put the EQ in anyway, just to be sure. And again, check your start and end points, real time or offline. Normalization needs to be off. You can add your ID3 tags here. If you're going to upload the MP3 for, say, download or something like that, you can add all of the information in here. So I could go to artist, for example, and we could go unders. That's going to be embedded in that file, and we're going to hit OK to bounce them out. I'm just going to stick them on the desktop for the time being and let those bounces commence. And as we can see, it stopped at my marker there and now convert it to MP3. That, guys, is it. So test your bounces out. What I do is just literally go to the file, press spacebar. It's going to bring it up here for us. Have a listen through. Really important on the MP3, you want to make sure there's no weird distortion or kind of clipping and things happening. That's why we've got that decibel of headroom, and that's why we do an MP3 just to test it. You get an idea of what's going to happen to the WAV. That sounds so much clearer. very last thing, if you're providing an MP3 for people to download and maybe play out, one thing that I would adjust is on your limiter, instead of having the out ceiling at -1 dB, bring it to around 0.3. You're going to get that extra bit of headroom, and you might be able to push the gain a little bit harder. It's going to a club system as well, like you're using someone's going to play it out, or maybe you're going to play it out yourself and test the tune out. You can go a little bit harder than that -14 LUFS. Music for a club system and like CD in general is going to be compressed quite a bit harder. You'll definitely notice that on like Beatport downloads. So you want to push that a little bit harder, have a slightly more compressed sound, but really A and B it and make sure you're not taking all the life out of your music. But apart from those changes, guys, that pretty much wraps us up, and you've got your finished tracks exported. And I hope you enjoy deep diving into this project here. So let's wrap up on the final video.